interesting when he was a very quiet man and an intellectual man, and Peter James, who was known as a very wild priest, in every way possible, probably the dirtiest footballer Ruben's ever seen, certainly dirtier than Charles Sutton. I don't know whether he was as dirty as Mopsy Fraser, but if Peter James and his brother Brian, both priests, were opposing each other, well, no holds barred, they would try to kill each other. Then he was sent to Dean to be with Monsignor Kelly, and everybody said, what a stupid appointment, like, you know, you've got a gentleman and a roughie thrown together, and Peter James blossomed under him, and people who loved him. He was as rough as guts.
Yeah, talking about Peter James.
I found a parish priest in North and South who lived with me when he first came there, because there was no priest who lived with Father Steele and I. Victoria was living in the caravan. I was in the caravan first, then last, then she got a presbytery in North and South.
Yeah, so he died of cancer of the pancreas. And I report that he went to visit Peter James almost every day for the next few weeks after he went to settle in Melbourne South with Peter James' sister Wilma Hodgkin. And then what was interesting was that Kelly did not want Peter James to die in an institution. So the women of Deep Dean Parish, I was told anyway, made a roster to visit Peter James at home so he wouldn't die in an institution. And Kelly also made the same decision himself. He didn't want to die in the company of lots of other priests. And so luckily the parish of Deep Dean is wealthy enough to have bought him a house and put him in there, and the women looked after him. And I think that was in a way a kind of for someone who only had one sister and not much of a big, very big family, Kelly found family in Deep Dean. And he found a sort of sense of belonging. And as you're right, Peter James was, according to people who talk to me, part of that kind of roughening up of Kelly, making Kelly a bit more kind of human. So Kelly started reading the sports section of the paper rather than just the front of the paper, and started actually kind of being a bit more communicative around matters of football.
Thank you.
Just identify yourself.
Bruce Duncan, Robert, thank you very much for your book is on my shelf. I must read it. Because I went to interview Monsignor Kelly, John F. Kelly, when I was doing my thesis, and as you know, it was a difficult parish because you had Bob Sanders living over the road, and you had a lot of other people who from the Catholic working group also in the parish, going to the same schools and sort of mixing around. So this was a very difficult situation. I would have interviewed him about 1980, I think it was. And I remember going into the presbytery there. You remember the presbytery was quite a confined building, but there were little spaces. And he took me back to a little private space. But he talked so secretly about all this that I can hardly hear him. And I think I had a tape recorder there, but it didn't pick up anything. They were so concerned about the sensitivity of the situation. So it was really, from my point of view, I got nothing out of it at all.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you'd like to comment on it.
Sure. Now, I think he was so loyal to the church that he would have found that conversation extremely difficult. And your book is still the leading book on the movement, so thank you for that. The clue with this is to ask yourself the question, who was the mastermind behind Griffin's biography of Mannix in the Australian Dictionary of Biography? And of course, it's all Kelly. Kelly did not ever utter anything in public which could be construed as disloyal to the church. And yet he was profoundly unhappy with the church after the split and that period you talk about in your book, profoundly unhappy. And so he would only ever used other people to tell his side of the story. And so he certainly confided in Tom Doyle, he confided in some of his priest friends, Matheson in particular, occasionally to Brendan Hayes. He would have thought he was telling you something, but he wouldn't have known you. He wouldn't have felt a sense of trust. You know, he would have been nervous about that interview. He would have been extremely, it would have been at pains really to sort of say, well, this institution to which I've given my life has turned out really to be not quite what I wanted. By 1980, when you interviewed him, he would have already seen that the wonderful work of Vatican II was, fast disappearing before his eyes. And I think Griffin won the contract to write the biography of Mannix. A list of 12 people applied to the AGB to do that. And Griffin told me he was so proud to win this contract, but he couldn't have done it without Kelly's help. And if you read that, that's a very, very clever insider's view of Mannix in the ADB, and Griffin was obviously a very smart bloke, but it's actually Kelly who wrote it.
Mick Lane, I was ordained in 1969 and arrived back fresh from Rome, having been away for 4 years and wondering what the hell lay ahead of me in parish work in Melbourne, because the catechetical wars were underway. The parish priests were being labelled, sometimes perhaps wrongly, but certainly being labelled as progressive or conservative. And to be a newly ordained priest in those days, you felt considerable apprehension about where you would be appointed. You certainly knew that you had no say in where you went. It was John F. Kelly who took on, not just to ease our fears, but who took on a leadership role with newly ordained priests in the years that I was serving between 69 and 73, that entailed regular seminars in pubs, in his own presbytery, which much of the funding of these things came out of his own pocket. He was a man of great hospitality, and everybody sensed the tensions in John's personality, but in these things he was at his very best. He was full of wit and humour and laser-like intellectual insight into what was going on in the church, what was being left behind, and what the price that was being paid for all of that was. So while I can understand and in fact accept that there were all these sides to John's personality and that he probably went through a lot of crises, I would think throughout the course of his life, I will be forever grateful for the service that he did to people in my generation in terms of indicating to us that we were on the right path and pointing a torch down the road for us.
Thank you, Mick. Yes, I interviewed a number of priests. I can't name them because they would reveal too much about what they were saying or hearing from John F. But I've heard that story from several people, and people who survived, awful feelings of self-doubt and confusion, and were taken upstairs, the same place where Bruce said the interview, and put into that lovely, cream-walled study upstairs, the presbytery at Deep Dean, and really they felt they could say whatever they wanted to inside that space, and that they weren't being judged, they weren't being, they were listened to properly. He was actually, I think, quite good at that. He was also very good with women, and I think that should be stressed, that the church, he understood that the church was actually, run by women. The women who actually made the church, and he was very, in the book I have a few photographs of some of the girls who were altar service at Deep Dean, and he was very keen to, very important, so part of the whole process was developing the role of women as well. And he was very friendly with a whole lot of nuns and senior lay women who are mentioned in the book. He was very fond of the old joke, which you've all heard in this room before. What are the three things God doesn't know, right? God has forgotten why he created the Jesuits. God doesn't know how much money the Dominicans have got, and God doesn't know how many orders of nuns there are. Apart from God knows everything. And he was sort of, and one of his favourite jokes was people would say to him, who are the most important people in the Catholic Church in Australia? He would list 6 nuns of his friendship group, and not mention Mannix or Carr or any of the obvious other choices. So he kind of had that, I think close up, when he felt he could trust you, and he felt that you were, you had the best interests of his church at heart. I think he was very good. But in public life, he was often bad. One of the people I interviewed was Brother McCarthy from St Kevin's, where my son had gone to school, and I got to meet a lovely man, Brother McCarthy. Many of you would remember him. When I interviewed him about John F., he said he was just a show off. And when John F. ran the Saturday school programs here at Cathedral Hall, McCarthy would sit very in the front row with his hands like that and just sneer at Kelly. I mean, Kelly brought out the worst in some people because he was so cerebral, he was so, in a public sense, he was so kind of, if you like, intellectual, far too intellectual for someone like Brother McCarthy, who was really, as a Christian brother, saw himself as being with, albeit St Kevin's, but being with the regular folks. And he saw Kelly as being, overly intellectual.
Excellent. Thank you, Rob. David Maloney from Cardijn Community Australia. It's not crystal clear to me, but I hear that Kelly wrote some or all of the inquiries for the YCW at some stage, and yet apparently he doesn't mention that in his diary. Was this just one of sort of many jobs that had been allotted to a fellow who was so capable, and it was almost an afterthought? And the other question I've got is, when he started at the NPI, might that have replaced, are there any clues as to whether that might have replaced his YCW interests?
Yes, I think the answer there is that in his diaries he talks about writing drafts of various things, but it's done like all genuine intellectuals do it. I mean, it's not a chore, it's not a job, it's not hard. So, for example, if you go to the 1950s and look at the histories of the world written by the Catholic schools, which are in six white volumes, put together by a group of nuns, actually Kelly. But for him, that would have been just sort of like something you do between lunch and dinner. It's not, it wouldn't have been difficult for him to have done that. In his diaries, he struggles more about people and about his feelings of inadequacy. Why doesn't he have any friends, and why can't he relate to anybody around him? And why is he struggling just to get simple conversations with people? And yet if you said to him, look, I want you to meet so-and-so, he'd be able to sort of say, well, actually, so-and-so, his father was a parishioner of such and such a church who then had this, his grandfather, he had the genealogies of all the Catholic families of Melbourne in his head. Because as he went around as a school inspector, he'd say, oh, yes, you're David. Now, I remember your father was so-and-so and your grandfather was so-and-so. So he had this encyclopedic memory of everybody and everything he ever read. And everything, so he was an idiot savant in that sense. But in terms of the people, he was pretty hopeless. Except for fellow priests, nuns, and people who were part of the church around him. But the average public, he wouldn't have had the capacity to communicate. And that's why he was no good at the Cardijn stuff. Ultimately, that's why he tries 3 times. In his diary, he describes how he brings together young people in Kyneton, young people in West Melbourne, young people in Footscray, has them sitting around talking about the Bible. And then he says things like, but they seem to just want to go out and play some sport, what was that about? And he doesn't kind of get that the young people you could bring into the young Christian movement are actually concerned about, as someone said this morning, about dancing with girls or learning how to play football or something else. He didn't kind of get that because that wasn't part of his life. Because you grew up in a pub, and those who grew up in a pub, you know that it's a very lonely life. Your parents are busy working day and night. You're sitting around reading books all day. You're actually not meeting anybody. And so the Deltite Hotel, the pub in Port Fairy, which is called the Star of the West, is still there today. These pubs, you go into them and you think about what we'd like to actually grow up in a pub. You'd have a terrible sense of inferiority because you're just the publican's kid, the brat, And secondly, you wouldn't actually know anybody. And thirdly, the kids from school wouldn't play with you. I mean, you're living a life that's very, very isolated. The only person whose life that he talks about in his diaries is his sister, Mary, of whom he was very fond. And he would go to visit Mary. There's a wonderful section there. Mary lived in East St Kilda, behind the school there, opposite PCW. And one day he's driving from Footscray to the school there to visit Mary, and he gets angry about something that someone said to him. So he can't even park his car outside his sister's place. He has to drive around the block to calm down. So as a man who's driven by this terrible sense of inadequacy.
On that note, would you please thank Rob Pascoe?